I always thought divorce was something that happened to other people. You hear about it in hushed tones at family gatherings, or you see the Facebook status change to "it's complicated," and you type "hang in there," because you don't know what else to say. I never pictured it in my kitchen, on a Friday afternoon, handwritten on a manila envelope with my name spelled out in the careful, looping script I'd known since we were both 19 and passing notes in community college English. I stood there for a full minute, keys still in my hand, the refrigerator humming like it was trying to fill in the silence. There was a faint lemon cleaner smell that usually meant she'd spent part of her day wiping counters, resetting the world the way she liked it. The counters were clean. The sink was empty. The envelope was centered on the table like a place setting for catastrophe. Rachel had always been a list maker. When we first moved in together, she taped a list to the fridge titled "Shared Life," and under that she'd written, groceries, rent, laundry, kindness. That last one used to make me laugh. Like kindness could be chore-charted. But maybe it should have been. Maybe if we had checked it off every day, we wouldn't have ended up here. I opened the envelope. The papers slid out with a sound that felt louder than it should have. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Irreconcilable differences. We'd said vows at a church in Franklin, Tennessee, on a spring afternoon with dogwoods blooming and an uncle sneezing through the readings. We'd said, for better or worse. Not until irreconcilable differences. I read the words, but the meaning only landed in pieces. Temporary custody schedule, proposed division of assets, legal representation. It was like someone had taken our marriage and put it through a machine that turned it into boxes to be initialed. The back door squeaked and Rachel stepped in from the yard. She wasn't crying, which hurt more than if she had been. She looked like she had when she decided on paint color or a new credit union. Steady, resolved. "You saw it," she said, not a question. I couldn't get my mouth to work. I just nodded and something cold slipped down my spine even though the room was warm. "I can't do this anymore," she said softly. We've tried. We've tried counseling and date nights and pretending. I can't keep pretending." I wanted to argue. I wanted to list all the reasons we should keep trying. Our son Daniel, 12 and gangly and still catching fireflies. The mortgage, the history. But all that came out was this small sound. More exhale than word. Daniel sat halfway down the stairs, frozen, holding onto the rail like a sailor to a mast. He wasn't supposed to be home yet. Basketball practice had been canceled because the gym floor was being refinished. I hadn't known. That felt like a metaphor. Not knowing things in my own house. "Buddy," I said, and my voice cracked. "We're going to be okay." He stared at my hands instead of my face, like the papers were more honest than I was. He didn't ask questions. He stood, turned, and went back up the stairs. I let him go because I didn't have anything better than okay. Rachel and I sat at the table like we had 1,000 times, except this time there were no plates and no iced tea and no talk about Daniel's math homework. She slid a pen toward me to sign a receipt for having been served, and my hand shook as I wrote my name. That signature looked like it belonged to someone else. My name, but a stranger's handwriting. The house had the hollow sound you hear in a church after everyone leaves. The closing of the back door echoed. My heart did too. That evening I took a walk to the end of the block and back, past the mailbox that still had both our names stenciled on it, past Mrs. Porter's yard where a plastic flamingo leaned in the flower bed like it had given up. When I came back, the envelope was still there. I don't know what I expected. That it would sprout legs and walk away? That it would catch fire on its own and free me from having to decide what to do next? We had been broken a long time. That's what people say later to make the story tidy. But the truth is messier. Some days were good. We still laughed sometimes. We still watched old movies and argued about the endings. We still remembered to buy each other the right brand of coffee. Love doesn't always die with sirens and smoke. Sometimes it dies in the small drafts beneath doors you never notice until one day you're cold. Rachel moved to a 2-bedroom across town within 2 weeks. The speed of it stunned me, how quickly you can unspool a life if you're determined. Half the closet bars went bare overnight and the medicine cabinet turned into a bachelor's display. One razor, a bottle of aspirin, toothpaste rolled imperfectly from the middle. She took the good skillet, the one seasoned exactly right from years of Sunday breakfasts. I told myself I didn't care and then made rubbery eggs in the thin pan we'd bought on clearance when we were 24 and broke and romantic about it. Daniel stayed with me Wednesdays and every other weekend. When he wasn't there, the house sounded wrong. Floors creaked in a different key. The refrigerator hum felt like a presence across the room instead of a background thing. I kept catching my reflection in the dark TV screen. Shoulders hunched, mouth set like I was always braced for something. People tried to help in the ways people do. My mother mailed me a book about prayer with a note in the margin by a passage she liked. A guy from work dropped off barbecue and 6 beers and said, "You'll be back on your feet in no time." Like this was a sprained ankle. Friends said the phrases friends say. Focus on yourself. Use this time to grow. At least you and Rachel are being civil. I nodded because they were trying, and because there was nothing else to do with my hands and face. But inside I was a scraped-out bowl. Money got tight fast. Lawyers bill like time is a luxury item, and suddenly the gutters needed replacing and the car made a sound that wasn't just a sound. I picked up overtime in the parts warehouse, taking the shift that started at 4 in the morning, because when your mind won't let you sleep, you might as well get paid for being awake. Daniel's grades dipped. He started getting conduct notes, which wasn't like him. One Tuesday after school, he slammed the minivan door so hard a hinge squealed. "Why can't you fix it?" he asked, and I knew he meant the door and the marriage. "You fix everything else." I opened my mouth to say the true thing, that I didn't know how, but what came out was, "We're trying." He shook his head. He stared out the window the rest of the drive. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with his math worksheet and tried to relearn ratios so I could help, and he said, "It's fine," in the flat voice of a too young person practicing adulthood. The house was a museum of small ghosts. The dent in the wall where the chair caught it during last Thanksgiving's crowded dinner. The stain in the carpet shaped like Idaho from a toppled glass of Merlot. The calendar in the hallway with dentist appointments crossed off and a circle around anniversary that I couldn't bring myself to erase even after she was gone. Like erasing the circle would erase the years. I found her cardigan behind the dryer, the green one she wore on rainy Sundays. I didn't tell her. I folded it and put it in a drawer like I was saving it for some person who didn't exist anymore. On the nights Daniel wasn't home, I made too much pasta and ate it standing up, fork clinking against the pot. I watched late-night infomercials for knives that could cut through shoes. I wiped the counters. I wiped them again. When the quiet got too loud, I turned on the radio to the AM station that plays old baseball games like the present is too fragile to risk. Grief for a marriage is not linear. One day you're okay enough to joke with the cashier about buying a single cup of yogurt, and the next day you have to sit in your car in the Kroger lot because a song came on that used to play when you drove to the lake as a family. I learned to keep napkins in the glove box. I learned which aisles to avoid. I learned that I could miss a person I still saw twice a week when we traded our son in the parking lot by the coffee place. The hardest was the bed. There is a loneliness particular to one side of a mattress. I slept diagonally for a while, trying to trick my body into forgetting the shape of what it had been next to. It didn't work. Bodies remember the geography of comfort even when you wish they wouldn't. The bottom wasn't dramatic. I didn't crash a car or get thrown out of a bar or call her at 2 in the morning to beg. My bottom was quieter. A Tuesday night, a kitchen light buzzing, a half-empty bottle of rye casting a long shadow across the papers that had started this whole chapter. I had been telling myself stories about being fine. The kind of stories men in my family have always told. Work harder, talk less, it'll pass. I was lifting more at the gym and sleeping less at home and pretending those two things balanced each other out. They didn't. I was a walking equation with no solution. Daniel had left for Rachel's an hour earlier. We'd eaten chicken nuggets because he said he wasn't hungry for anything complicated. And then I'd overcomplicated everything by talking about school and friends and how he was processing, which made us both feel like subjects in a study. He got quiet and tight-shouldered and said, "Can we not?" Then he left his allowance money on the counter and told me to use it for milk. 12-year-olds shouldn't feel like providers. The bottle came out because it was there, because I wanted to round off the jagged edges of the day. I wasn't drinking hard or even often, But that night I poured with the kind of care that is its own warning. The first sip hit like a warm hand on the back of the neck. The second like forgetting. The third like a permission slip signed by no one. The papers sat where they'd always sat when I didn't know where else to put them. Middle of the table, one corner dog-eared from being moved for placemats and then moved back afterward. I read through them again, even though I could have recited most of it by then. There's a section about best interests of the child that always makes you feel like a defendant at a trial where the judge is a version of yourself you can't convince. Somewhere between page 6 and 7, the room seemed to tilt. Not the kind that sends you to the floor, just enough that all the flat surfaces in your life feel unreliable. I stood and the chair legs screeched and something in me made the quietest sound, like a branch letting go in winter. I walked to the sink and turned on the tap and ran cold water over my wrists like my dad used to do after mowing the lawn. I watched the water bead, then slide. I said out loud, because sometimes you have to hear it, "You are not going to drink your way out of this." The sentence felt like it belonged to someone stronger than I was and also like it had been waiting for my mouth for months. I turned off the water. I dumped the rye. It made a glugging sound that felt obscene and righteous at the same time. I rinsed the bottle and set it upside down to dry like I was doing dishes after a party that hadn't gone right. Then I sat on the floor with my back against the dishwasher and cried the way you cry when no one can hear you. A soundless ache that leaves your ribs sore. I cried for the kid who married at 24 and thought a good credit score was a love language. For the man who learned to keep a family calendar up to date and failed at the parts of caretaking you can't put on paper. I cried because I didn't know how to be divorced without it feeling like I'd failed a test I didn't know I was taking. When the tears stopped, I did something small that felt big. I picked up my phone and scrolled to the counseling center number Rachel had texted me months ago with a, "Maybe this would help." I'd shrugged off at the time. I left a message. My voice shook, but it was my voice. When I finally slept, it wasn't diagonal. It was on my side of the bed, the way a person sleeps who knows where he is even if he doesn't know who he's going to be yet. Therapy didn't fix me. It gave me tools to stop breaking myself further. The first session I talked too much and too fast, as if there were extra points for speed. The counselor, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and sneakers that squeaked when she crossed her legs, said, "Let's slow the tape." We did. I said the kind of sentences that don't look like much on paper, but change your air pressure when you say them out loud. I'm angry. I'm ashamed. I want my son to trust me. I started running again. Not long distances, just enough to feel the map of my neighborhood under my shoes at dawn. Mailboxes, the bakery that smells like vanilla just before it opens. The corner where two older men wave at everyone like it's their job. My body remembered what to do. Some mercy. How bodies remember even when minds go blank. I set up a new routine for Daniel's nights, the kind that looks small and turns out to be the skeleton of a life. Tacos on Wednesdays, we each try one new topping even if it's weird. Friday movie night, he gets first pick and I don't complain when it's the same superhero film for the 5th time. Every other Sunday, we cook something that takes longer than an hour just to force ourselves to stand side by side and talk about nothing until it turns into something. I told the warehouse I wanted more responsibility. Not to escape home, but to build something that wasn't just the calendar blocks where I didn't have my son. I trained 2 new hires and remembered I liked teaching. I pitched a safer way to stack pallets that saved 3 minutes per load and a few surbacks. The supervisor handed me a clipboard like it was a medal. It wasn't glory. It was purpose. Rachel and I learned to speak a new language where the nouns were drop off, pick up, permission slip, dentist. We handed each other envelopes and said, "Have a good week," like civilized people. In time, the civility softened into something like respect. We sent each other the occasional picture. Daniel with frosting on his nose. Daniel holding a fish he swore was this big. We did not rehash. We did not rewrite. We raised our son from 2 houses that kept their porches swept. A year after I poured the rye down the sink, I took Daniel camping at a state park by the river. We forgot the hot dog buns and ate them on folded slices of wheat bread. The tent zipper stuck. We laughed anyway. After he fell asleep, I sat by the embers and thought about the man who had signed for a marriage he couldn't carry and the man who had learned to carry a different shape of life. I missed Rachel in a way that didn't want her back so much as it honored who we had been when we were good. I felt gratitude that we had not destroyed each other in the process of becoming separate. On the drive home, Daniel asked, "Are you happy?" He said it like a scientist gathering data. I thought about the question the way you're supposed to think about a road sign: pay attention, adjust speed. "Not every minute," I said, "but more minutes than before." He nodded like that math made sense. Back in the kitchen, I opened the drawer where her green cardigan had slept behind the dryer's ghost for months. I put it in a paper bag and drove it across town. I texted, "Left something of yours on the porch." She wrote back a single heart. There are apologies you can't make in words. Sometimes you make them by returning a cardigan at the right time. My house is not a museum anymore. It's scuffed and loud on Daniel nights and tidy on the others. There is art on the fridge that is mostly rectangles because he's discovered city skylines. There is a plant I forget to water and then remember, and it forgives me by not dying. There is a bed I sleep on the right side of because the right side is mine, and I have made peace with belonging to something that small and that exact. Divorce didn't end me. It ended an us that had been limping, and it demanded I become a me sturdy enough to be Daniel's dad and Rachel's co-parent and the kind of neighbor who brings his trash cans in on time. It asked for a quieter kind of bravery, the kind that signs forms and shows up for school conferences and learns to make pancakes without burning them. Sometimes at night the house feels like a held breath, and sometimes it exhales. I talk to the quiet. It doesn't answer, but it listens. That is enough.